In this video, I'm going to cover the technical side of creating a walk cycle. In this case, I'm going to do a in-place cycle, and I'll do another one for a forward progress cycle. So I've already got the arms of the bony character or rig down here, and we need to know what are we trying to do. So I've pulled a page here for the Animator Survival Kit. Highly recommend this. Lots of good illustrations to help you really understand what you're trying to do here. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to add one more step, so it's going to go from the right foot forward to the left foot forward and then back to the right foot forward, and that'll create the full cycle. You need to make sure that the feet stay put. I'm not going to go through refining any of this or really adding any detail into the walk. This video is just primarily focused on creating the cycle that works properly, and then the feet stick throughout the entire thing. So we're really going to break this down to this contact position, which we're going to mirror to the other contact position and then repeat this one at the end. And then we'll put the passing position in between those two. So one thing that I've done here is I've adjusted my timeline to 0 to 24. Make sure that you're using either 1 to 25 or 0 to 24, or you can do other timing if you want to, but as a starting point, 2 steps per second is pretty standard. So I use 0 to 24 just because it makes finding the middle is really simple, so I tend to work that way. But you can certainly work 1 to 25 if you prefer that. So the first thing we need to do here, for a cycle in place, one foot's going to move forward, one foot's going to move back, and then they're going to just go back and forth like this. So the first thing you need to do is figure out what is the gait of the character. And you can see as I move this, the foot gets pulled away. It's not coming up on the toe, it's actually pulling away from the rig. So you have to have some up and down, and in this particular case I have to have a significant amount of down to allow the feet into this position here. So something like this is fine. It might be somewhere around there. Alright, so I'll just kind of round that to the 100th. That'll be close enough. And you can see that this one's still pulled away, and this foot is not quite the way it needs to look. So you can see here the contact, the toes pointed up. Typically, like this is fairly exaggerated, so it depends on the type of walk you're trying to make, but you don't have to point it up quite this much. You don't have to have the foot coming off the ground quite so far right here. So let me go ahead and adjust this. You want to use the heel ball. Most rigs are going to have this kind of foot control these days. You want to use the heel ball. If I rotate this, that's rotating the ankle, and you see it displaces the foot. Right? If I use the heel ball and I middle click and drag, see how the heel stays fixed in a fixed position. This is going to allow us to slap the foot down without moving it. Right, so I'm just going to bring that up so it straightens out, maybe something like that, and I'll probably have to move this back up to accommodate. Back foot, same thing. I'll use the heel ball, maybe something like that. Yeah, so right around 4 looks pretty good. This one I might have to adjust again, so I'll just leave that. I'm going to just move this up until the legs kind of straighten out. Right, so somewhere around there is pretty good. And I could straighten out this back leg probably a little bit further just by reducing the amount of heel ball it has. And I'm just going to add the control key so that I can pull that down a little faster. So this is middle mouse click drag here. So I don't want to push it. You don't want it to lock straight. You can see that at some point it just snaps straight. If you allow it to do that, you lose control. And so I'll just put this to maybe just something that's round, or right around the right area here. So I want a little bit of bend to that knee. So something like that looks pretty good. You don't want these things to be snapped straight. So 3.4 on the back foot, 1.3 on the front foot, but I'm also not paying attention. I'm sort of dialing in these without paying attention to where these are. So I could move these forward and back as another way to get the knee in position. So let me just try pushing that to 2 and then see what we get here with the heel ball. Right, so that works pretty well at 2 and 2. Right, so that knee feels pretty good right there. So I would say right at 2 looks good here. For this one here, let me try to adjust that to 2, which means I'm probably going to have to back off that. Not 20, 2. There we go. So let me back off that heel ball here. So you can see I'm just looking to have a slight bend to the knee. Just the first kick in here looks pretty good. So that's pretty dang close. And I'm not going to worry about fine tuning this. Like, you want to rotate the hips. We'll want to do all sorts of other stuff to this walk, but I don't want to get into that in this video. This video is just all about kind of getting the basic thing in place. So I'll just round these again. So we'll just go 30 on this side. Looks like negative 30 on this side. Okay. So remember, opposing It's a really simple thing, but really easy to overlook actually once you get your head in the technical details. That's it. So that's basically what the pose needs to look like. You can always compare here. Right? This is the one we're trying to make here. You can see I haven't really massaged the hands or anything yet, but I've got the basic swing in place. Again, we're not going to swing the hips or the shoulders for this one. That should come in, but doesn't. It's not necessary for creating the loop that I'm trying to show in this video. So once you have everything looking the way you want, select all of the controls and press S. So that'll key everything. You can see here, result 186. It's keyed 186 channels. I want the same thing done at frame 24 because the cycle is going to repeat exactly at frame 24. So I'll set another key there and you can see 186 again. Now, for in the middle, we'll just want to flip this. So what I can do is look at the values and compare. So this one's 30 on this side. The rotate Z is not being animated. And then negative 30 on this side. So I can switch this one to 30 and this one to negative 30. There's a shortcut for that. I can just do times equals negative 1, and it'll multiply those. So 30 times negative 1 is negative 30. Negative 30 times negative 1 is 30. So they're just going to flip-flop back and forth just like that. Feet, kind of the same thing here. So I'll just grab these guys. And because it's the same value, I can do times equals negative 1. That'll flop those feet. And now I need to look at these values here. So for the back foot, that one needs to go to the front, so it'll be a negative 2, and the other foot will be 2.1. So I just got to remember those briefly. And you don't really have to have these by the number. You can kind of dial them in to look right, and it's perfectly good. It's actually a good thing if there's some asymmetry, a little variation from left to right. That's a very normal thing. So now that I've got that set, I'm going to go ahead and press S. Keep this simple and just kind of lockstep them at this point, left to right. So now we have the start of a cycle. Right? It's a very Nordic track, and so it doesn't look like a very good walk at this point. But that's basically what we need to get this thing going. And at this point, we could go ahead and mess with the feet, but I'm going to go ahead and add in the in-between positions. Right? So this passing position right here, you can see it's up on the planted foot. That leg is straight. The other leg is bent at a little less than 90 degrees, and the toe is pointed back. That again is fairly exaggerated. The height of the foot and the angle of the foot, all that's fairly exaggerated here. So what I want to do is first establish how high the hips should be here. So I'll just move that up. And again, I don't want the legs to 100% lock. I want that to be a very subtle bend in this knee, because once you get here, you get that IK lock that happens. It's very difficult to control. So somewhere around here looks pretty good. Again, I'll just kind of round that. Probably about here looks fine. Yeah, so that's still got a subtle bend to it, so that'll work well. All right, I want that same value over here at 18 because 6 is halfway between 0 and 12. That's exactly where we want to have that passing position. Red is kind of the halfway point between them. And then 18 is between 12 and 24. So I'll just click over here to 18. You can see that the value actually updates, and I would have to either copy paste that. There's a nice shortcut in Maya for this. So if I go to frame 6, and then I middle click, so the scroll wheel, middle click at 18, you see it doesn't actually update the viewport. But if I key this, it'll take that value that was over here at frame 6 and sort of paste it over here at 18 essentially. So now 6 and 18 will have that same value. So that is a really nice shortcut. I use it all the time instead of copying and pasting keys. It's just a little faster. All right, so that gets us our up and down cycle. So now you should see that the whole body moving up and down. That's a good thing. It needs to happen in walks, especially in animation. You need to exaggerate that up and down in order to create that feeling of weight. So the next thing we need to do here is make sure whatever the planted foot is, this is the planted foot, that's the one that's going to be straight. So this one needs to be bending right here at frame 6. So I would not recommend using the ankle control. So you can rotate like this. You can do it and you can get away with it. But what happens is this foot is going to roll up onto the ball like this as it's starting to take off. And then if you roll the ankle, it displaces that location of the toe. So it's difficult to make that stick. This is why most control rigs are going to give you something for the toe. So in this case, this gives you that same sort of action, but the pivot is based on the end of the foot. So that tends to be an easier place to roll that foot up. So I'm going to go ahead and use that instead of using the ankle position. On some rigs, on many rigs actually, there's not a separate control for this, but on this particular rig, this is how it's done. All right, so I'm going to make sure that everything's keyed everywhere, so we're good. So I'm going to go ahead and just roll this up onto the toe. Something like that looks okay on the angle. You see I can't move this. This is just a rotation control, so I got to grab the main foot here, and I'll move that up, and then I'll move it back so that it matches what we have going on here, right? So that's the pose we're trying to achieve right here. All right, so it doesn't have to be exact, but something like that looks pretty good. It's a good starting point. I'm not going to worry about the numbers on this. You can go exact numbers if you want to duplicate side to side. For this one, I'll just make it look right. For a cycle like this, what the most important things are the start and the end frame. They really need to be identical. In the middle, have as much variation as you want. It won't make any difference. It'll work fine. So on this next one, this foot hits the ground. So this is a foot that's going to come up. And I say that just because when you get here at 18, it's hard to tell what's on the ground and what's not. This foot right here is the one that's passing. So I'll go ahead and roll that up. And I can go a little bigger on this one, actually kind of push it backwards like that. And then again, it depends how realistic you're trying to be. Picking feet up really high is not super common. People are generally very lazy and don't pick up feet very high. So, in the example here, you got that passing position really high, and it really doesn't need to be that high. You can again play around with these things, but this will give us a little variation from left to right here. All right, so I'll just go with that. That's all we really need, and we should have something that looks more like a walk. You can see that it's very mechanical right now, and it needs a lot of love, but it's moving. This would basically work. So the cycle itself is kind of there. We just need to repeat it over time, and then we need to fix the feet to make sure that they are sticking to the ground. So those are the last two things to do here. So in order to cycle them, that happens in the graph editor here. And what we want is these values to update over time. Like, so it does here, and then it'll take this point and put it here, and then just repeat that over and over again like that. So right now you can see that these, when they hit the end, it just goes blank, right? So it just, not blank, but it holds the same value. So what we want to do here is, let's say for instance, if I pull this out past 24 and I scrub this, it's just going to stop because here you can see that it's just holding those values. So what we want to do is, if you can't see this before and after, that's just view infinity. So this is the default, that'll be off. So view infinity on, so you can see what's happening before and after the last keyframe. And then under curves, change post infinity to cycle with offset. And then you see those curves updating this direction. And pre-infinity, cycle with offset and update this direction. So right now, though, all I did was a single control. So that one control would continue moving on kind of forever, but everything else will just stop. So you need to select everything and just do that same process. So curves, post-infinity, cycle with offset, curves, pre-infinity, cycle with offset. All right, and that should do it. This should now be a cycle, and you could sort of expand time out here. So let me just push this out to 240, let's say. And then that will just cycle on kind of forever here. So one thing you want to check for is when you're checking a cycle like this, sort of toward the end of the time frame that you've created, if there's an offset, if there's something that's not matched up, then you'll end up with something that changes over time. So let me just show you. Get in here. Okay, so you'll see that for every one of these controls, and I'll just grab a couple things that I know are animated. For this one, it's 30 and negative 80, and I click to 24. And 30 and negative 80, right? So all of the channels are exactly the same from the first frame to the last frame. If there's any tiny amount of variation, just a small little thing, just that is enough. So it's a tiny bit different. It's 2 and 2.1, right? So negative 2 and negative 2.1. And at first, you won't really notice that very much. But over time, that will get progressively worse. And in this case, it's a small enough value that it's not making a tremendous difference, but let's just take a look here. Yeah, you can see that it's only pushed to 3 at this point, so it's not a huge difference. But the longer this thing needs to cycle, the worse that effect becomes. So there you can see the foot like really getting out of line. So now it's walking on the back of the foot, right? So it just mounts over time. So the offset, what it's doing is any value change between the first key and the last key, it just keeps incrementing that in. So, for this foot, it starts at 2 and whatever it was, negative 2.1, I think. So it's a 0.1 every time it subtracts another 0.1. So the next time it goes through, it'll be negative 2.2, negative 2.3, and it keeps going. So again, the more times you iterate, the more problematic that becomes. So you just want to make sure all of those numbers are exactly matched. You want to make sure you have the keys aligned so that everything's keyed at exactly the same start and end time. And then the last piece you need to do to make this stick is we're going to need to move this forward based on this control. So you see that if I grab the main control here and slide it, the feet come along for the ride. If I grab the hips and move them, the feet stay behind. That's the way IK should work. But in this particular thing, because we're cycling in place, we want to be able to move this main control, but we still want the feet to stick. So the way you do this is you have to look at the distance that the foot is traveling. And both feet should be traveling the same distance here. So I'll just start at 0. So it's at negative 2. And then it goes to, whoops, I'm sorry. This is translate. So we're at 2, and then we're at negative 2. So that's a total value change of 4, right? 2 to negative 2. And then we're at negative 2, and we go back to 2, so another value change of 4. So this is moving 8 units total over the 24 frames. So all we have to do here, first of all, you want to make sure that that's exactly the same for both of these. And you can see because we copied numbers here, that's all going to align properly. So once you know that both the feet are moving the exact same amount, essentially you just key it at 0. We won't need a middle key on this, so I'm going to go ahead and delete that. And I'll go to the last frame here, the last key, and I'll put in that value. So we're going to move 8 ahead here. All right, and so now that thing should be moving at the same speed or the same total distance traveled over that 24 frames. But the problem is that you can see how slippy it still is, super slippy. The problem is that both the feet and the controller are moving with easing on. So I'll show you that real quick. And actually, you can see this. Let me just do this. We have a little bit more time to see the repeat. I'll show you what this looks like here. So you see how the character, there's like a pulse to it. It goes forward and then it slows down, and it goes forward and it slows down. Right? So what's happening there is that's the default interpolation, but that's not the way that a human moves when we're walking. Right? So here's the curve that we have out of that. So you can see that what the default is to ease this. So have these flat handles like this, and that means that it's going to slowly start out, and then it's going to speed up, and then it's going to slow again at the end. When you watch somebody walking, not somebody who's starting a walk or ending a walk, but somebody who's just like in the middle of getting wherever they're going, they move in a pretty consistent speed, and that is best represented by linear tangents. So this button right here gives you linear, and you want it to happen to the whole curve, not just a selected point. So I'll just click here. That's linear, and you can see that now that's going to do that forever. So it's just going to keep moving in that linear fashion forever. So that means it's going to have a consistent speed, which now you should see it travels a lot better. Right? That looks more natural than the last one with that heavy pulse. But look at the feet. They are still slipping all over the place. See how much slide there is on those feet. The problem there is it's exactly the same thing. So when a foot comes in contact with the ground, I'll just do this on Translate Z, that's the only one that matters. When the foot is in contact with the ground, it shouldn't ease out. It shouldn't go slowly and then speed up and then slow down again. It should go linearly between when it hits the ground and when it releases from the ground. So a way to do this is select both keys and then grab just the handles that you want to adjust and then set those to linear. Right? So now you see that's exactly linear as long as the foot's in contact with the ground. We'll change this later. This will actually be in contact with the ground for a few more frames, but that's a starting point. So now with this, you should see that foot stick exactly onto the ground. Right? So the reason this works is both controllers are moving at exactly the same speed, so they have the same start and end. They have the same value change over that period of time, and they're both interpolating linearly. This is moving opposite this, which makes the foot stay in place. So that's the trick to doing a cycle in place. So we just need to do it on this side here. So same thing, I'll grab both those, grab the handles that I'm interested in, and set that to linear. All right, so that should be it. That should give us a functional walk at this point. Just make sure that it looks like the feet are sticking. So not a nice walk, very, very mechanical. You see those knees are kind of bouncing all over the place, but it cycles properly and the feet stick. Those are the main things that I want to hit in this one. The much more sort of fun and difficult part of this is actually creating character, and giving this a more natural feel. We'll deal with that in another video. For this one, that's the technical setup. I'm going to do another video that shows the progressive, um, the forward progress walk.